Hey there, friends. It's Dr. Bill, and as my favorite quarterback, who's now injured for the rest of the year, used to say before he would lose his games, here we go, here we go. Welcome to our secondary prompt, purpose, passage, and essay for this week, having to do with the pythons from the Florida Everglades. The title is, let me give you the exact words. I don't want to mess up here. The snake that's eating Florida, and it happens to be the Burmese python. Now, just a quick reminder that regardless of what grade level is writing an essay for the extended constructed response, that's worth 10 points, 5 points from two different readers, three for organization and development, and two more for conventions, the grammar, the editing skills. Okay, so the first bullet, go this way, says clearly state your central controlling idea thesis. The second bullet, how to get to two-land. Organize your essay, have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. It just happens to look like I love you in sign language. The introduction should have the idea. The body should hopefully have evidence that is explained, and there should be some kind of closure. All right. The third bullet says, develop your ideas in detail. So if you're going to have one piece of evidence, explain it. If you're going to have two pieces of evidence, explain those two pieces. If you're going to have three pieces of evidence, explain those. If you're going to have four or more, it's a compositional risk, but yeah, that's fine. Just make sure you explain them. The trick is they have to all relate to each other and tie together with each other and relate to the idea that the student has and the topic. The fourth bullet says to make sure that your evidence and the way you explain it and explode it in your body is in the body. You can't just have a bunch of evidence, because if all you do is use my color of yellow highlighter for evidence and you highlight everything in the essay that's evidence and there's nothing left, that means nothing came from the student. So you're going to get zeros for doing what's called a summary, where nothing comes from their head. That's why it always says clearly state your central idea, your controlling idea, your thesis, your claim. In other words, you have to make an opinion about one part of the claim or the other one. In third through seventh grade, and then in eighth, ninth, and 10th, they have to say, here's the counterclaim, and here's why that's not really relevant. It's called identify and refuting. That can get you a 3. Okay. The last bullet that we've been working on, talking about today, the fifth bullet is to make sure you have good conventions. Edit and revise your essay before you turn it in. So let's go ahead and take a look at the prompt that I made and sent out to 500 of you who wanted just to see some samples. And this, sadly to say, is my last free video that I'm posting in relevance and relating to the free little practice tests that I sent. They all had an elementary and a secondary mini test, and there was a extended constructed response one short constructed response for answer evidence, one reading question or two, and then one or two, what I call it, one or two um, editing and revising questions. So you kind of get a little snippet of each part. And I'll be sending those every weekend. I had been feeling a little sick, still recovering from my accident from November the 8th, for those of you who are wondering. Um, but I should be okay soon. Um, so let's get started on looking at the secondary prompt. I'm going to show you a couple of different uh, techniques to use to explain and explode evidence. And this one's going to happen to have a dual topic. In other words, they're going to ask for two things. It says, explain what many people have done with pets that grew too large, with pythons that grew too large, and we'll call that the nose bracket to connect to the other side. Why that could be a problem for people or animals who live nearby. And so, yes, I don't think I would want to start giving an elementary kid a prompt that has a dual topic, and perhaps it's going to be hard to teach a middle school or high school student to do that. But what I'm going to suggest is focus on the first part, what people do with pet pythons that grow too large, look for evidence, explain it. Then you can transition to the second part of the topic, how or why that could be a problem for the people or animals who live there. So we'll get started and transition to the prompt and give you some ideas to help you. Okay, so here we go. I have the secondary ECR, extended constructor response 10-point value page. And your students really need to get used to seeing how these ECR pages are constructed. Um, they are going to see the word prompt because anything that has a box in it, a short constructed revising, short constructed reading with answer evidence, or an extended constructed essay response is always going to have that word prompt if they do it correctly. First, it'll tell you to read the article. It even tells you before the article to read the article. So what they're saying is, please do not try to answer the prompt by only reading the prompt, because restating or repeating is not the goal in a response. A response is the goal in a response. Okay. So I broke it into pieces. Explain, prompt, what many people have done, plural, with pet pythons, not zoo, not wild, that grew too large. So that was part one. Remember, I told you like we need a dual topic, and why that could be a problem for people or animals who live close by. So you're going to notice that because it says people or animals, you might have to look for a little bit of evidence in the passage for people and some evidence for animals. And then, of course, the ones who live close by to where they're being let go. And so there's the 5 bullets that I mentioned, 4 more bullets that are just the reminders um, that the before, during, and after. And then finally, if you want to have a 10th bullet, you might tell the kid to think of the word explain as their 10th bullet on how to have a good chance to get a 10. And I honestly think this is the easiest, simplest way to teach kids to understand their goal in an essay, how to get a 5 and I use my five fingers to teach these five things. Okay. So my folder, my advanced folder, basically is adapted straight from the TEA rubric. Do you have a prompt in the topic? Yes, we're going to write that. Do you have an introduction? Do you have a wow? What original words can you use? In other words, you can use the exact words of the prompt. That's called restating or repeating for many of you, as long as you answer it with a CIS. If you've heard of that show called CSI, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about CIS, a central idea, a controlling idea, or a thesis statement. And if we were doing opinion argumentative, it would be a claim or an opinion. Okay. What other words can you use to start? In other words, use synonyms. What original way? And in today's essay, I'm going to use um, sample number 3 on my how to engage the reader and keep them connected. And so I'm going to use a brain uh, detail to have my hook. Your inside your brain are two things: your thoughts and your opinions about the topic or the idea that you choose to write about. And again, this prompt happened to have two topics, so the students need to come up with two ideas to have the best chance to get the full score. And then how do you organize in the body? Well, you give evidence, either paraphrased or in quotations. You can give an example or examples. It's always best to not confuse the reader, to tell where the evidence is, your location, what line or lines. Scene or scenes, stanza or stanzas, sentence or sentences, section or sections, paragraph or paragraphs. And then in order to get to three land, it says you have to develop those ideas of evidence, each evidence example explained and exploded. So explain your examples and your evidence by doing what I call GPS, getting pretty specific using what I call the 6 W's plus one. Who, what, when, where, why, which, how. Who, what, when, where, why, which, how. The reason I say plus one is because even though how doesn't start with a W, it ends with one. And I'll be showing you how to use that to make sure that kids know that explaining is typing or writing between the lines to add their own understanding of the evidence and how it relates to both the topic and the idea slash ideas that they choose to write. And finally, does the essay have a conclusion that ties everything together like the laces on a pair of shoes? For your struggling kids, they can restate or repeat the topic and or idea. It just doesn't help. That would be an essay with a conclusion that's present, not effective, because restate, repeat, one, two. Uh, the bullet for a 3 says that your introduction and conclusion are conclusion, effective, reflection. And then, of course, when you're done, make sure you take the time to edit with cups with two S's. There you see what those are in red. Make sure your cups has the second S of checking for run-ons and fragments, and that you add, remove, replace, or move certain things around before you turn in your final draft or submit. You can also use CREAM, which is another acronym that I came up with. Whenever you have a banana split, you sometimes want to add, remove, replace, or remove things, and we'll call it combine to revise. What's the best revision? To remove, to replace, to eliminate, to add, or to move. All of those things are going to help improve the quality of the essay. All right. And again, this is worth 10 points. Um, I have these on sale for $25, and you get this whole uh, like a class set of 25 of these sent to your home or school um, through the United States Post Office. It'll also include my Brabeck organizer, a class set of those in 25 that are that have the all of the editing, revising, reading, and writing um, strategies in them. You saw me when I did the elementary one. I used the hand technique with those monkeys to show you how you can get a good grade uh, on elementary. Now we'll be using um, a form of this, but I did it on a piece of paper. So there are four things that break down an essay in terms of organization and conventions that will get you up to a three. And then there's two things, mainly one, the editing, the grammar, the conventions. So the first piece that I folded it into, this is an 11 by 17-inch paper. The I, because it says organize your essay, you have to have an I, a B, and a C. An introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So in the introduction, since we're trying to get you to have your students to go from two land, which was part one of our training, recorded trainings, how to get to three land, four land, and five land in organization development conventions, we're going to start making sure that each week you learn a new hook or lead or attention getter or a wow, like you saw on my folders, or a whistle. The other thing that you'll get in those $25 special price, besides the advanced folders and the graphic organizers, is I have also a dual language uh, version of those that has editing and revising in English and Spanish. It has how to write the essay in English or Spanish, and even how to get the two uh, short constructed responses, uh, how to get those 2 points with answer and evidence in English and Spanish. Um, that's going to be it. Basically a primary one because many kids maybe are in an elementary level, they might be testing in Spanish, or you'll have a dual language classroom. That way they can have the same set of folders and see while you're talking in English, they can look at the Spanish side and understand exactly what you're talking about if their English is limited, or they might be a secondary student who's trying to transition to English, but they need some sort of guidance, and maybe your English is not so great. So this will help them with the editing, the revising, the short answer, and the essay with some guidelines in Spanish. Okay. So the other I is the idea, or as we saw in my folder, the ideas that you need. And in elementary, we'll call it a central idea statement. In middle school, a controlling idea statement. In high school and many prompts in middle school, they'll use the word thesis, and an opinion argumentative, they'll ask the students to make a claim, to state an opinion. Okay. So the second part that I did was I have a B for body. Okay. So here's how I broke this down, because we are no longer trying to get ones or twos from now until the test. We're trying to get threes, fours, and fives from each reader. So if you look at these two, this big B in the middle, uh, I want you to notice that it makes two little d's for development, because that's what it does say on the third bullet, is to develop your ideas in detail. So I have a green D inside for this flower where you have some evidence and it says this in alphabetical order, each evidence example explained and exploded. Okay. So this yellow E here represents your first piece of evidence that you might want to use. And then I have 8 petals of a flower surrounding that little evidence that you would highlight. And it's EXPLAIN exclamation mark. And inside, you saw this in my folder. You can use anything because whatever is on the line, the evidence, you have to write between the lines by adding your own understanding in your own words. And you can use details such as who, what, when, where, why, which, how, and wow. Okay. The outside D has maybe a second piece of evidence. So, like the prompt that we just saw, if it says, what is causing, what are people doing with the pythons that get too large? You could give me 2 examples of evidence of what they're doing and then explain that, that evidence to help the reader understand maybe why they're getting rid of those animals, when they get rid of their animals, where do they take them? All of that stuff is going to be important. Uh, and it's just common sense, you know. And a lot of times, what people are doing, unfortunately, is saying, here's my evidence, and then I'm going to try to explain with evidence. No, the explaining has to be your ability to draw conclusions and infer, read between the lines. So if you happen to have a second piece of evidence for that first idea, maybe 2 little eyeballs here, um, then you might also say, okay, if I might have to explain using 1, 2, or 3 of these, maybe more as we develop, as we go through the months. I want to be showing you how to develop D in more depth D and how to start exploding with with what's called vocabulary and vivid word choice that will sometimes make the difference between a 2 and maybe a 3 or a stronger 3. So again, we have our EXPLAIN exclamation up on top, who, what, when, where, why, which, and how, and wow. The wow is anything that's using and you can see I have the word toes there. It's written above too, just so you can see toes. Toes is on my folder right here at the bottom. Anytime that you're going to add some depth um, to the topic, what you can do is possibly use a truism or give a theme at the beginning or at the end to share your brain details, your opinions and thoughts, your emotions that you can tell or show. Tell is just using emotion words like we did in the last essay for elementary. Showing is maybe saying what people might do because they're angry or sad or happy, what they might say, what they might be thinking. And then the S of toes is the senses. I want to be able to see and hear, taste, touch, smell. Uh, that, there's a lot of senses that come into play when you're talking about a snake that's way overgrown, um, and people are not doing the right things. Okay. The salsa, because of the vivid word choice and vocabulary, you basically want to spice up your essay a little bit with vocabulary that's vivid or appropriate figurative language. Okay. And I have this acronym TOES in Spanish as well, with a lot of the same meanings. So there's a saying that says, don't judge a person until you've walked a mile in their shoes. Well, I add inside those shoes are their toes, their voice, and you don't always necessarily need to say your toes, your voice, but they do want to know what is the voice of the author who's writing this selection? What is the voice, the personality, the character of the characters that are being written about, the people, um, perhaps if animals express um, themselves through their body language, what exactly are the animals doing? And, if you have a poem or a play or a fictional story that has the students using um, animal fantasy, then of course you can treat an animal in that kind of a story the same way you would treat a human. Okay. So the next part that I want to show you before I show you the essay that I wrote based on this is the other part. We said, how would it affect the people or animals who live in that area? So that allows you to break the topic down into two sections in the body. So I have also orange and purple here. In case you can't see, that's my purple. The camera changes the coloring a little bit. So again, if you're going to give me three examples, then explain all three of them. You're going to give me four examples, explain all four. If you're just going to give me one, then explain it. And you don't have to have this many sentences. In one sentence, I could tell you a who, a what, and a when. In a second sentence, I might tell you a where, a why, and a which. And I might have one wow, one pose type detail that I'll add. So again, we have each evidence example explained and exploded, but this would be the first piece of evidence about how people could be impacted or affected by these python snakes being released into the wild. So again, we have EXPLAIN exclamation, who, what, when, where, why, which, how, and wow. Who, what, when, where, why, which, how, wow. Okay. And again, exclamation and emotional mental connection using one of those little uh, details in the acronym TOES. Once again, don't judge a person till you walk them on their shoes. Inside their shoes are their toes, their voice, their character. And if we say, okay, this orange flower is going to be the evidence explained about how it affects people, then the purple one can be the evidence explained that tells how it's going to affect animals. Okay. So again, we have the same 8 petals, EXPLAIN exclamation, toes, and who, what, when, where, why, which, how, wow, and that would be for the body. Okay. And as time progresses, for those of you who join or have already joined part 2 or both parts of the extended recorded training, you'll be every single week, I'll be giving you a new prompt and a passage and showing you how to build and scaffold so that we can build to rigor, not crazily think that we can start with rigor and have essays that are getting 3s, 4s, and 5s in the first semester. That's too hard to do. We have to build, teach rigorously, but build to rigor when you're uh, trying to develop the quality of the essay and not just have a quantity of essays being written. So let's take a look at our last piece of the paper that I folded into 4 parts. There needs to be a C, IBC. C is going to be a closing, closing, present. So if the closing is not effective, they can at least get a 2 for that. conclusion, three syllables. Uh, if it's effective, if they have an end, that might be a one sentence ending or ending two sentences. And we use one of these three ways to restate and repeat the topic or idea. If that's all that we think the kids can do right now, then we can teach them step two, how can you rephrase one or two of the words in your closing? So you're not giving the reader leftovers, you're giving the reader dessert at the end. And reflecting, reflection, conclusion, effective. So how is life better or different or worse if what we talk about in our idea, our evidence, and the way we explain it regarding the topic, uh, how would things get better or worse? How would they change? Those things can be done to bring about quality in an essay. The other C is once you're done, you've got to have, if you're going to improve the conventions, that's called editing. Capitalization, usage, punctuation, spelling, and sentence boundaries such as run-ons or fragments. If you're going to improve the content, how it's organized or developed, that's called revising. Okay, so that's kind of a cool thing to make. I'll open it up so you can see it for a second, the whole thing. I don't know if I can get it all in there because it's so large. Um, I'll just, I guess, slide it up for you so you can maybe take a screenshot of each little part that you feel is helpful to you and your students. Okay. All right. So the hook, the attention getter that I'm going to use this time around is going to be an opinion. So if you look back down here where we can read it, if you look at number 3 on my how to hook your readers and keep them engaged, number 3 says, write a sentence in your introduction that includes your POV, your point of view, your opinions about the idea, the example that you chose in response to the prompt. Okay. So your, again, if you think of the glasses as topic and idea, like my little pirate that I gave you guys all in part one, uh, the patch has a T on it for topic, and the eyeball is circular, and it has three little lashes up on top that remind you to think about who, what, when, where, why, which, and how. So you can either give your opinion about the topic or about the idea that you chose in response to the prompt. So that is on page 68 of the STAR 2.0 reading and writing binder that I sent to all of you in part one. And the opinion page, that's your opinion, is found on page 14. Okay. So a lot of kids don't know the difference between fact and opinion. So this might be something that you make uh, a copy of so that your students can not just have it on their computer, but they can have a hard copy so that they can start writing about opinions uh, in the and add some voice to the paper because the voice of the characters is important, even if you think the voice of the kid coming out, the writer, is not as important. So I will show you how that is wrong in my response. So here is my essay, and I went ahead and color coded it. Okay, so if you take a look here, I did say I was going to hook the reader by using an opinion. So this first sentence here is what you write first to get the reader's attention. We wrote out the name, my name. My number was 23 in high school for basketball, football, volleyball, whatever sports that we were playing. It was a tiny Christian school called Grace Christian School in Farr. the prompt, the topic, the purpose is informative expository. The red is the controlling idea or thesis, since this was a secondary response. And then these yellow pieces that are highlighted are the evidence that I chose to use. And if you see here carefully, I have a one evidence that's explained and underlined in green. The second piece of evidence that I use is explained and underlined in blue, just like you saw on the graphic organizer that I drew artistically. And then the third piece of evidence I explained and underlined in orange. And then we have to save time for an ending. And because you can only fit so many words on one of these 26 line documents like the old days, I gave myself permission to go past the end because I was well within the 2,300 characters that you're allowed. So this would probably get a 2 or a 3 in organization development, and at least a 1 in conventions, and perhaps a 2 because, I tried my best to have good grammar. All right, so let's see, based on everything that I've shared, what would an essay, what is a sample? If you always want to, if you want to give your kids an idea, teach them through their ability to read after you teach a certain skill or skills, how to understand how they can write one based on their ability to read, if that makes sense. All right. So the hook, the lead, the attention getter, how to hook your reader and keep them engaged. The hook your reader is on page 68, as I mentioned. The opinion page, that's your opinion, is on page 14. Write a sentence in your intro that explains your point of view or opinion about the topic or the idea. So here we go in regards to pythons being released and how it affects people. What's happening with pet pythons in the Florida Everglades is detrimental and extremely dangerous to the people and animals of that part of the United States. So I mentioned the pythons, which were in my topic. Um, what's happening is the releasing them into the wild. Uh, that part of the United States is the Florida Everglades, detrimental and dangerous, extremely dangerous. Those are my two opinion words, negative things that I could use. And then that allows me to lead, as we see here, into our controlling idea or thesis. Shift. Many people who bought them as pets let them loose in the Shift Everglades of Shift, Florida when they grew too large, period. So that answers part of it. Okay. So I want to show you a cause and effect relationship because they asked you two things. How did they get rid of them? What did they do with them? And how do you think it affected people and animals? So sometimes your controlling idea statement or thesis needs to come in two sentences to make sure that you answer both parts of what's being asked. This created a threat to animals and people who lived in that area. So in the body, I'll be able to explain to you what the threat was. And then uh, we have to remember that whether we're going to start with the evidence and then explain it, or give evidence and then give an explanation and then use evidence to back it up. It doesn't matter necessarily what order, but I think if students can take a piece of evidence that's already there, they can think about how that affects the people and the animals and etc. So here's our first piece of evidence, highlighted in yellow, that little first yellow E that was around inside the green flower. In paragraph 7, the author mentions that baby pythons can grow up to 20 feet in length. So that's not how they were when they bought them. So um, so everything I'm saying with my mouth could also be written with my pencil or my pen or my keyboard. So it begins to pose a problem because there's no place to keep an animal of that 20 feet. That's like almost an entire room in many cases in a living room or a bedroom. So here's my explanation. 2 sentences. That would make it very difficult opinion for their owners who, to be able to afford to feed them. What? And so they don't have a way. In other words, they won't know how they're going to feed them because it's probably going to be expensive. Okay. Again, my opinion. It also, it also was most likely impossible to keep them safely enclosed in cages or places to keep them from getting loose. Okay. If you read the article, it says that some of the ways that the animals got to the Everglades was that they were just blown there by some of the hurricanes that have happened in that Florida coastal area that's being discussed. Second piece of evidence. The author closes the paragraph by mentioning it has been discovered that numerous individuals ended up setting their snakes loose in the wild. Okay, so that's what happened. That's why it happened. All right. In the second picture, under the title and in paragraph 8, okay, let me show you that picture really quick. Second picture, a snake that tried to eat an alligator. So you can see that the snake actually split open when he's trying to get this alligator uh, swallowed. Okay. Now, why am I saying that? Let's find out. In the second picture and in under the title and in paragraph 8, the author shows a python that is attacked and that has attacked an alligator and is trying to eat it. Okay. How does that relate? Well, this is me using my blue explanation, my blue flower. This clearly shows that these snakes would not be afraid to attack and eat a human if he or she would get too close. Okay. It shows what that the snakes what would not be afraid emotions to attack what and eat what a human who, if he or she who would get too close, if that's where they were. So you can see that I'm just basically using the W's. Let's add some more. This is our fourth piece of evidence coming up. Paragraph 12 mentions that Burmese pythons breed very quickly. So if the students don't know that word, it means that they have babies and reproduce themselves very quickly. Why does that cause a problem? More pythons, more babies would mean more reptiles, bird eggs, and animals would cause many of these to be killed, disrupting the food chain. Okay, so the more pythons that were grown or born, it means that all of these animals and eggs that haven't even been hatched yet are going to be killed by these pythons. If they're going to eat an alligator, they're willing to eat a human or anything moving that they feel is going to fill their appetite. Okay. Sometimes they say your eyes are bigger than your stomach. I think that's what that one snake experienced by trying to eat that alligator that was probably almost as long as him. So, closing. The only way to solve this dilemma, vocabulary, is to have very harsh opinion, penalties, fines, or even jail time for people who break the law that forbids the bringing or selling of these pythons to our country. These, there are many other wonderful pets that families could buy instead. So that's my reflection about maybe what needs to happen if people keep trying to do it, and the better alternative, what could happen as a means of replacing the python purchasing with more realistic animals like cats and dogs and mice and bunnies. And unfortunately, if we keep buying these Burmese snakes, what's going to happen? Well, probably uh, all your pets of your neighbors, the bunnies, the cats, the dogs, the mice, the iguanas, the parakeets. There's probably going to be uh, Burmese snakes that are going to say, you know what? I can't find food here in the Everglades because I already ate it all. So I'm going to start venturing out into other places, and that could cause a problem. So this this is just me discussing with you, pretending like you're my class, and this kind of gives your students somewhere to go. And what I would say is my essay is copyrighted. You can't use my ideas. You can use certain words or phrases, but if you just literally copy and regurgitate my essay, I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to lower your grade or give you a zero if there is zero original writing. And sometimes the students won't copy you, but if you're reading the essays when you're giving feedback to like a cross section of your students and you give the essay a compliment for one portion of it, what tends to happen is the kids say, "Oh, she likes that." And they copy that student's idea or word or sentence or one of the toes ideas possibly. So what you need to have is a copyright poster in your classroom where whoever thought of an idea or a word choice or a figurative expression or a quote truism first, that becomes theirs. Write their name and their whatever idea it was that was theirs. And no one in the classroom can copy or use that idea without having to pay a copyright fine. Because I just got tired of students doing that in my classroom. Because I want to send, if I have one classroom, 22 different essays to Austin, or if I have to grade, two, three, four, five classrooms, I want to be able to send up to 100 essays that look and sound different. So thank you so much for watching. I will post the next elementary and secondary prompts and purposes uh, for next week because most of you are on Thanksgiving holiday this week. I'll be posting that in the next couple of days for you. Um, Please share or tag some of your writing and reading teacher friends. I look forward to many more of you signing up for part two. If you just want to get the weekly mini tests in elementary and secondary and be able to see me guide you, you only need to purchase part two, comma, but many of you have students who are still in Zero Land, La La Land, and One Land. And I don't want you to stay stuck there. I want you to purchase part one, where I've already done all of part one in September and October. So you're going to get a lot of ideas on how to make sure that you get very little or hopefully zero zeros. And when your students get zeros, it means that one reader or one automated scoring engine said, I'm giving it a zero in organization and development based on what I see. and a zero in conventions based on what I see. And remember, if you get a zero in organization development, they automatically get a zero in conventions. Sometimes they'll get a zero for the 34 other reasons that I shared in the very first video, part one. Because there's not just one way or two ways. It's not just off topic or um, no central idea, no controlling idea or thesis. I've seen, think I counted them in like 35 different ways to get zeros. And it's until your students know what a zero looks like or sounds like, they won't know how to change it. So I really recommend you take advantage. I have a few days left in November. So what I'll do is I'll hold the price of $25 for part one and $25 for part two until this coming Monday. Once you all get back from Thanksgiving holiday, I'm going to change it to $50 for each part. Uh, and you'll be continuing. If you join, you'll be getting emails almost every day with guidance and instruction. If you message me, then I help you privately. If you have samples that you want me to look at and give you suggestions or give you feedback, I want to be the best possible consultant, not to all of you in general, but to each individual that signs up. So thank you so much for taking part and watching this video. This was a little bit longer, but the ones for the essays or the extended constructive responses to make sure I can teach you ideas that are new and fresh and creative. I want to make sure that I go in depth in my guidance for you, the step by step, sequencing of the going through the entire process of writing an essay, whether it takes you 2 or 3 days because you're limited on time, or 2 or 3 weeks because you really want to make sure the kids understand each part and you can give a grade on each one of those parts. Give a grade on the hook, the quality of the hook, a grade on the central controlling idea thesis, a combined grade on how the hook and the idea work together and are developed, uh, a grade for each piece of evidence and how they explain it and how it relates to the idea and the topic, a grade on transitions, how you're moving from one idea to the next, a grade on how effective the conclusion is, if they can at least restate and repeat the idea and or topic, um, at least there's something there. It's not effective, but it's present. They can have a chance for it too. If they do what I call giving the reader whiplash and there is no ending, then you might say, to be strict, say, you know what, you had an opening, you had the head, and you had the body with evidence that you explained, but there were no shoes, there were no feet to your essay. So I'm going to give you a 1 in organization development, and I might give you a 1 or a 2 in conventions, which, you know, if I give you a 2 in conventions, 3 and 3 from both readers is better than anything less than 5, which my goal is to help every single person who's joined this recorded training series the best possible chance to get away from the scores that have happened these first 2 years. Do not keep doing what you've been doing if the majority of your kids are not getting 6s through 10s. Okay? I can give you my word as a person of faith and someone with 33 years of experience that if you incorporate my ideas, even with your own prompts and passages and processes of writing, because my strategies are aligned directly to the TA rubric, not to some district acronym or program or something that didn't even come from Texas, that has no idea how to teach uh, students how to write an essay well. You know, this is not teaching to the test. This is teaching quality essays because of the things that I'm showing you that add depth to the introduction, the vocabulary, figurative language that you add to the body, and the dessert, the reflections that you have in your conclusion. So thanks for your patience and watching. We'll see you next week. I'm going to wait a few days. There's a few of you that have ordered part two or both parts. I'm going to wait a few days because it takes so long. There's so many emails now that I've accumulated over the last 2.5 months that it takes quite a bit of time to send you each one after the other. So I'll wait a few days until more of you sign up, and then I'll just send them as a group. I put it as a blind carbon copy. So you're only going to see, me sending it to you, even though I'll be sending it to perhaps 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 other teachers at the same time, just to save me time. So bless you guys. Take care. Enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday.